Okay, let's talk about the Yatagarasu, the three-legged crow. There's always felt like there's more to it than just being a guide in Japanese mythology.
Absolutely. It feels, well, enigmatic, doesn't it? Like there's a hidden identity, something deeper going on beyond just, leading Emperor Jimmu.
Exactly. And that's what we're digging into today. We want to follow those threads, see if we can find some real-world links, maybe a hidden story behind the myth.
Yeah, trace it back.
We'll be looking at figures like Oyamatsumi, Ikamochi, Ōkuninushi, Kotoshiro-nushi, Emperor Jimmu, of course, and the Kamo clan.
They seem key.
They really are. All pieces of this puzzle surrounding the Yatagarasu. How they connect. That's the important part.
Right. So let's quickly recap where we've been. We talked before about Yatagarasu maybe having the divine name, Oyamatsumi, right? And strong links to Kyoto.
And that connection between the Kamo and Kin clans, too. Possibly related maybe through the Haji clan by marriage. Lots of threads there.
But the big takeaway was Yatagarasu and the Kamo clan. They were definitely connected. Yes, that Kamo connection is really our starting point for this. Because while the Kamo obviously venerated their own gods, if you dig a bit, it turns out Oyamatsumi wasn't just, associated with them. He was actually an ancestor.
An ancestor of the Kamo. Okay,
Right.
and tracing that back even further.
We find the originator of that whole Yatagarasu line seems to be Ōkuninushi no Mikoto. So you start seeing a clear lineage.
A family line for the crow god. Interesting.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating is how this ancestor's deity, Ōkuninushi no Mikoto, seems to become the main god the Kamo clan venerates over time.
So the ancestor god becomes the clan god.
Pretty much. They revere figures like Kudo Kamamochi no Mikoto as major deities. Knowing that ancestral deity, it really shows the deeper roots.
It's like finding the source of the river. And this connects to Onwestshire Shrine, too, doesn't it? Supposedly one of the oldest shrines in Japan.
It does. Omi was unique, architecturally speaking.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a main sanctuary building, a honden, for the deity.
Right, the mountain itself is the object of worship.
Exactly. And according to the priest there, Ōkuninushi no Mikoto is enshrined there, along with Kotoshiro-nushi.
Ōkuninushi's son, Kotoshiro-nushi. Okay, so both Kamo ancestor god and Kotoshiro-nushi are at Omiwa. That's quite an overlap.
It really starts to tie things together, doesn't it?
It does. Now, the Kamo clan name itself, how does that fit? They obviously became pretty important, especially around Kyoto.
Well, records link the Ohosono public office. It was sort of an administrative role with the chieftain of the lineage that became the Kamo.
Oh, okay.
And they seem to acquire the Kamo name around that same time. And crucially, shrine records explicitly name Ōkuninushi no Mikoto as the tutelary deity of the Kamo clan.
The guardian spirit, basically.
Exactly. So it suggests a really profound foundational link between the clan and this ancestor deity.
The ancestor becomes guardian. Makes sense.
Now, Kotoshiro-nushi keeps popping up. He's a pretty major figure himself in the myths, isn't he? Oh, absolutely. Kotoshiro-nushi is big. Son of Ōkuninushi, descendant of Susanoo. He often shows up with his father, definitely a big star in the mythology. His presence signals importance.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. This convergence. You have the Kin clan, the Kamo clan, and they both seem to venerate gods from the same, or at least a very closely related lineage.
It strongly points towards some kind of shared ancestry, doesn't
It
it?
really does. And we established before that the Kamo clan's specific tutelary deity is Kotoshiro-nushi, Ōkuninushi's son.
Right, which is distinct from, say, my own family's connection, which traces more to the Ōkuninushi Susanoo line.
Although, we also talked about Ōkuninushi and Ōkuninushi potentially being different names for the same deity, didn't we? Especially looking at the land surrender myths.
That's a very strong possibility, yes. The names get used somewhat interchangeably in those contexts. But, even allowing for that, there still feels like a subtle separation in those Kamo and Kin ancestral lines. It's a nuance worth noting.
A subtle distinction. Okay. But the absolute key takeaway here, the thing we've been building towards regarding Yatagarasu, what is its tutelary deity?
The evidence points very strongly to Yatagarasu's tutelary deity being Kotoshiro-nushi, son of Ōkuninushi.
There it is. Yatagarasu's guardian is Kotoshiro-nushi. Wow. Okay, so Kotoshiro-nushi is obviously important in the myth, particularly that land surrender story.
Hugely important. The Kuni-Uzuri. He shows up right in the middle of it. You have Ōkuninushi, his father, having basically established order on Earth.
Right. He brought the lamb together.
Only for the heavenly deities, the Amaterasu line, to basically say, hand it over.
Yeah, talk about a hostile takeover bid. So what happens? How does Kotoshiro-nushi play into this demand?
Well, a powerful envoy from heaven, usually Takemikazuchi, comes down to demand the land. But
Yeah.
Kotoshiro-nushi isn't there first. He's out fishing or something.
Convenient.
And Ōkuninushi basically says, look, I can't decide this without my son Kotoshiro-nushi's input. Which tells you something about Kotoshiro-nushi's influence, right?
Yeah, absolutely. His agreement was needed. But wasn't there another son involved? Takeminakata.
Yes. Before Kotoshiro-nushi weighs in, Takemikazuchi has this famous test of strength with Takeminakata, another son of Ōkuninushi. And even Ōkuninushi admits Takeminakata is strong.
So there's some resistance, at least initially.
From Takeminakata, yes.
Yeah.
But then we get to Kotoshiro-nushi's. Well, let's call it his agreement. And it's very strange.
Strange is putting it mildly. He doesn't exactly fight, does he?
No, not at all. The myths say he agrees to the surrender. But how? He apparently overturns his boat, claps his hand in some ritual way, and transforms.
Transforms into what?
Into a Shirokujira, a white whale, and vanishes into the sea. Or sometimes it's depicted as turning into a Shirohata, a white flag.
A white whale or a white flag? I mean, that sounds like surrender, but it's so symbolic. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, it hints at something hidden, and it connects to this old Japanese idea that doing things in reverse, customary actions performed backwards, could actually be a kind of curse or signal something else entirely.
Reversed actions as a curse. How does that apply here?
There are interpretations linking the specific way he clapped his hands, the kashiwade, before disappearing, suggesting it might have been done in reverse, like a ritual associated with hiding or sealing something away, maybe even signifying dissent in a coded way.
So not a straightforward, okay, you win, it's loaded. Could it mean maybe his loyalty wasn't entirely with his father, Ōkuninushi?
That's certainly one interpretation. That his actions, while appearing compliant on the surface, might actually signal a sort of hidden alignment with the Amaterasu side. A betrayal, perhaps, or at least a complex maneuvering.
Which brings us back to Yatagarasu. If Yatagarasu is Kotoshiro-nushi, could he have been secretly working with the heavenly deities all along?
That's the really provocative theory, isn't it? That Yatagarasu, as Kotoshiro-nushi, was maybe orchestrating things behind the scenes, helping the Amaterasu side win the land surrender, but doing it covertly, without revealing his true name or identity.
A hidden hand guiding events. That's quite a thought. So what happens after the land surrender, according to this idea? What about the Kamo clan?
The theory goes that after the dust settles, Kotoshiro-nushi, having played this hidden role as Yatagarasu, effectively returns to the name Kamo, and he establishes the Kamo clan as this really powerful force. Powerful behind the scenes, possibly even secretly controlling really important imperial rituals like the Daijosai, the accession ceremony. It hints at this almost shadow emperor kind of role for the Kamo chieftain.
Whoa, running things from the shadows. Is there anything else supporting this idea of the Kamo having this kind of elevated, maybe hidden status?
Well, think about the Kamo shrines themselves, Kamigamo and Shimugamo in Kyoto.
Cooler.
Architecturally, structurally, they have striking similarities to the Ai's Grand Shrine.
Ai's, the absolute center of Imperial Shinto.
Exactly. Similar layouts associated smaller shrines. And even more telling, the Kamo shrines adopted the Saigu system.
Where unmarried imperial princesses served at the shrine, like at Ai's.
Precisely. Having that system implies a level of importance almost on par with Ai's. It suggests maybe a front and back relationship, Ai's being the public face of imperial authority, and Kamo maybe the hidden older power.
That's a really strong parallel. So if all this connects Yatagarasu is Kotoshiro-nushi, he helps the heavenly side. His descendants, the Kamo, become this hidden power. Why isn't the story better known? Why is it obscured?
Well, you can imagine why, right? If the official history acknowledged that a son of Ōkuninushi, Kotoshiro-nushi, essentially sided against his father's lineage during the foundational land surrender myth.
Yeah, that's messy. A family turning on itself at the very beginning.
Exactly. It would complicate the neat narrative. So the theory is that the Kamo clan's true origins, their connection to Yatagarasu Kotoshiro-nushi, and their immense behind-the-scenes power were likely, well, deliberately obscured or erased from the main historical accounts.
Makes sense from a political standpoint, I suppose. Keep the story clean. Now, this also touches on Ōkuninushi himself. His origins are a bit debated too, aren't they?
They are. There are theories that Ōkuninushi might have been a Torajin, an immigrant, maybe from the Korean peninsula or elsewhere, based on the types of deities he and his followers worshipped. It adds another layer of complexity.
And then there are those, less mainstream sources, like the Takuchi documents.
Ah, yes, the Takuchi documents. Highly controversial, of course, but they reportedly state outright that Ōkuninushi was a foreigner. which, just adds more fuel to the fire about these ancient figures.
It feels like every answer just leads to more questions, doesn't it? You even mentioned potential links to other ancient cultures.
Yes, there are some really fascinating, though highly speculative, threads that some researchers trying to draw, connecting figures like Ōkuninushi or Kotoshiro-nushi to, say, lost tribes of Israel or other ancient Near Eastern cultures. That's definitely something for another deep dive, perhaps. Hints of even deeper hidden histories.
Wow, okay. So let's try and summarize the core idea from today. What have we really uncovered about the Yatagarasu?
I think the most compelling takeaway is this potential identification. Yatagarasu is very likely Kotoshiro-nushi, son of Ōkuninushi.
Right.
And this lineage connects directly to the Kamo clan, suggesting they might have held this incredibly influential but largely hidden role in Japanese history, operating behind the imperial court.
And we should stress, this is piecing together clues from mythology, shrine traditions, disputed texts. It's an interpretation exploring intriguing possibilities.
Absolutely. It's speculative, built on connecting dots that aren't always explicitly linked in the mainstream accounts. But it raises a fascinating question for you listening at home.
Yeah.
If these hidden connections are real, if Yatagarasu was Kotoshiro-nushi, if the Kamo held that shadow power, how does that change how we view Japanese history and mythology? What other stories might be hidden just under the surface of the tales we think we know?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What else is lurking in the shadows of these ancient myths? Definitely something to think about. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.